In 1993, a young man named John Walsh received a phone call that would completely change his life forever. It was the kind of call no parent ever wants to receive. His 6-year-old son had disappeared from a shopping mall in Hollywood, Florida. At first, everyone believed it was a misunderstanding. Maybe the child had wandered away. Maybe someone would find him nearby. But as minutes turned into hours, the situation became every parent's worst nightmare. The police investigation began immediately, but the case quickly became complicated. There were very few clues, no clear suspect, and no explanation for how a child could disappear in a crowded public place. For John, waiting was impossible. Every day without answers felt like another punishment. While investigators searched for evidence, John started his own mission. He refused to allow his son's disappearance to become just another forgotten case. He contacted media outlets, spoke publicly, and used every opportunity to keep the investigation alive. Many people told him to accept that he might never get answers. But he refused. For years, he searched, investigated, and pushed authorities to continue looking. The case changed his entire life. He lost his old career, his normal routine, and the person he used to be before that day. But something else was created, a determination that would not disappear. Years later, new information began connecting old pieces of the investigation. The person responsible had managed to avoid consequences for years, believing the past had disappeared. But John had never stopped searching. He transformed his pain into a mission. Instead of taking revenge through violence, he chose another path. He built awareness. He helped create systems that protected children and assisted other families going through similar tragedies. His fight eventually became bigger than his own case. For years, the person responsible believed, but they had underestimated one thing: a parent who refuses to forget. The investigation continued for years, and eventually the truth came closer to the surface. The person responsible was identified, and the world finally understood what had happened. But the most powerful part of the story was not the punishment. It was the fact that one person's determination forced an entire system to change. John's revenge was not about destroying someone else. It was about making sure no other family had to experience the same pain without support. The tragedy that broke his life became the reason he dedicated decades to helping others. And that became the ultimate form of revenge. Because sometimes the strongest response to someone who causes unimaginable pain is not anger. It is turning that pain into something powerful. Something that creates change. Something that proves they did not win. But the journey did not end when the world finally learned his story. In many ways, that was only the beginning. Because after losing his son, John Walsh had a choice that would define the rest of his life. He could allow the pain to consume him, or he could turn that pain into something that helped others. For many people, a tragedy of that level would have been impossible to overcome. Every memory would bring back the same questions. Every normal day would feel incomplete. Every family moment would remind them of what was taken away. But instead of disappearing from the public eye, John decided to use his voice. He understood something important. His family was not the only one facing this nightmare. Thousands of families across the country were experiencing similar situations, searching for missing loved ones, waiting for answers, and feeling powerless against a system that often moved too slowly. So he turned his personal loss into a larger mission. He began working with law enforcement agencies, lawmakers, and organizations focused on protecting children and supporting families. His goal was simple: make sure other parents had resources, information, and support that his family desperately needed during those first terrifying days. The same determination that once drove him to find answers now pushed him to create change. Over time, his efforts gained national attention. People who had never heard his name before began recognizing his story. His tragedy became a symbol of a much larger issue, showing the world how important public awareness and rapid response could be when someone goes missing. But behind the public image, the pain never completely disappeared. Success did not erase what happened. Recognition did not replace what was lost. Every achievement came with the memory of why he started. The person responsible for his son's disappearance had taken away years that could never be returned. They had created a wound that would never fully heal. But they also created something they never expected. A person who refused to stop fighting. Years after the tragedy, the investigation continued to attract attention. Advances in technology allowed investigators to revisit old cases with new tools. Evidence that once seemed impossible to analyze could now be examined differently. Old files were reopened. New methods were introduced. And information that had remained hidden for years slowly became clearer. For many people involved in the investigation, the case represented something bigger than one crime. It represented the importance of never giving up, even when years pass and hope begins to disappear. Because every unsolved case represents a family still waiting, a question still unanswered, a story still incomplete. John's determination became an example of how one person's refusal to accept silence could create change far beyond their own situation. His story also changed how many families struggled to get immediate attention and resources. But increased awareness and stronger systems helped improve the way these cases were handled. The tragedy that destroyed one family became the reason many other families received help faster. And that was the part that made his story different. Many people think revenge means making someone suffer the same pain they caused. But John Walsh's journey showed another form of revenge. The kind where the person who caused the damage does not get to control the ending. The kind where their actions become the reason their victim becomes stronger. The kind where a terrible event becomes a force for protecting others. Years later, when people look back at everything that happened, they saw more than a crime. They saw a person who transformed anger into action. They saw someone who refused to let tragedy define the rest of his life. The person who caused the pain wanted one thing, to take something away. But instead, the aftermath created something they never intended. A movement, a voice, a legacy. But they did not always see the private moments when memories returned, when old questions remained unanswered, and when the pain of losing his son still felt just as real as the day it happened. Many people believed that finding answers would bring complete peace. But John learned something different. Sometimes justice does not erase the pain. Sometimes justice simply gives people the strength to continue. Instead of allowing anger to control his life, he focused that energy into protecting others. He became involved in efforts to improve communication between families and law enforcement, because he understood how important the first moments after someone disappears can be. He knew what it felt like to wait. He knew what it felt like to search. He knew what it felt like when every unanswered question felt heavier than the last. And because of that experience, he wanted other families to have something his own family desperately needed during those early days: support, attention, and hope. His work gained more recognition over time, but with that recognition came responsibility. People began looking to him not only as a victim of tragedy, but as someone who represented thousands of families facing similar situations. Every interview, every public appearance, and every conversation carried the same message. Do not stop searching. Do not let forgotten cases disappear. Do not allow time to erase people who are still waiting to be found. The story also changed the way many people viewed revenge. For centuries, revenge has often been portrayed as anger meeting anger. Someone hurts another person, and the victim responds by causing equal pain. T. John's journey showed another possibility. A person can take the greatest victory was building something stronger from the damage they caused. Over time, John's work helped bring attention to missing children cases and encouraged improvements in awareness, reporting systems, and public involvement. The tragedy that once made his family feel powerless became the reason other families gained a stronger chance of finding answers. And that transformation became the part of his story that people remembered most. Because anyone can become consumed by anger. Anyone can spend years thinking only about what was taken from them. But it takes something different to take that pain and turn it into protection for others. It takes strength to continue after losing something that can never truly be replaced. And the loss that changed his life forever became the reason he dedicated himself to making sure others would not face the same journey alone. Because in the end, revenge was never about making someone else suffer. It was about proving that even the worst moments cannot take away a person's ability to create something meaningful from the ashes. And that was the legacy left behind. Not anger, not hatred, but determination. A reminder that sometimes the strongest revenge is simply refusing to be defeated. In the end, John Walsh's story became more than a story of loss. It became a story of resilience, determination, and the choice to keep moving forward despite unimaginable pain. The tragedy changed his life forever, but it did not take away his ability to make a difference. The person who caused the suffering may have taken away precious moments that could never be returned, but they could not take away John's purpose. Instead, his pain became a reason to protect others and create awareness that helped countless families. Years later, people continued to remember not only what happened to his family, but also what he built afterward. Because the greatest victory was not revenge. It was survival. It was turning heartbreak into hope. And it was proving that even after the darkest moment, one person's determination can create a legacy that lasts far beyond their own story.